Well, I don't know if you know this, but every once in a while we take a trip to Israel. We're hoping actually now that the peace agreement's been made, we're hoping it holds, and we're praying for the peace of Jerusalem and that this will continue to hold. And so we're in the works, getting ready to plan our next trip to Israel. And so I want to encourage you, if that's a place you've never been, I would encourage you to go. I think every believer should make their way there. The Bible everything jumps off the page. In fact, two of the places that we'll talk about today, it's the first stop that we go to when we get to Israel. But a couple years ago, I was talking to a guy, and we were talking about a trip that I had taken to Israel, and we were just talking about the incredible experience. And this guy says to me, he goes, man, I wish I could go to Israel. And I was like, you don't have to wish, let's go, right? Like jump on a trip and be a part of it. And he's like, oh yeah, well, it's expensive. I was like, well, it's not that expensive. And then he's like, well, you got to get on a plane. I don't think I could get on a plane to do that. And he's like, I'm like, man, you get on the plane, just, I don't go to sleep. I don't care, but just get there. Like you got to be there. And it was kind of excuse after excuse after excuse. And what this guy was saying to me was like, man, I want to see some amazing things in my life. And I was like, yeah, but you're not willing to leave your house. You're not going to see a lot of these impossible or amazing things if you don't get out of your comfort zone. If you don't move to places that might make you a little bit uncomfortable or go through things that are hard, right? Growth in seeing amazing things is hard. When you were kids, you ever get growing pains? Growth hurts. Growth is difficult, but you got to get outside of your comfort zone to see things. And I just wonder for all of us, have you ever wanted to see God do the incredible? Have you ever wanted to see God do something so amazing and so impossible? And I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes you read the Bible and you hear these stories and you're like, why don't I see that? Why don't I see these kinds of things? Or what goes on? And some of you can feel like, man, there must be something wrong with me. Or is God still doing the same thing? Today, what we're going to be talking about is, do you need to see or do you want to see the impossible with God? Do you want to see God do incredible things? Look, here's the reality. If you want to see God do impossible things, you got to get out of your house. There's part of you that needs to step forward in faith and to go to places where you need to see the impossible show up. And so this morning, what we're going to see is the book of Acts is making a transition, right? The book of Acts is a story about the early church. And for the last few weeks, we've been talking about this guy, Saul. Some of you may know him better as Paul, in his conversion. But Saul's gone to Tarsus, and he actually spends a couple years there. So the book of Acts makes a transition and goes back to Peter. And he's going to talk about Peter here for these next chapter or so. And he's going to talk about, and Luke is going to mention how Peter gets transformed and how his eyes open up to what God is going to do. But we're going to see God today do some impossible things. And here's today's target statement. It's this: if you want to see God do the impossible, you have to walk in places where you need it. If you're going to see God do the impossible, you're going to have to walk in some places where you're going to need him to do the impossible. You're going to need him to show up, and you're going to need him to do some things. And so let's jump into Acts chapter 9. Starting here in verse 32, it says this: as Peter traveled about the country, he went to visit the Lord's people who lived in Lydda. This is a city near the coast. There he found a man named Aeneas who was paralyzed and had been bedridden for 8 years. Aeneas is actually this incredible guy that God's going to work in his life and do something amazing. But this city, Lydda, is actually where now the airport is. So when you land in Israel, you're in Lydda, right? And then we make our way to Joppa, which is where you guys may have heard of it as Jaffa now currently. It's where Jonah and the whale takes place. And so what happens here in this story is Peter has left the church in Jerusalem to go visit other believers. But how many of us know Peter's busy in Jerusalem? Anybody in here busy? You're so busy in life you can't necessarily walk where God has you to walk because you're so busy. I mean, Peter's the lead pastor of a mega church. Right? In the beginning of the book of Acts, thousands of people are getting saved. And Peter and the other apostles, their job is to do ministry. And how many of us get so busy doing ministry that we don't do ministry? How many of us get so busy doing our job or parenting or doing all these things we don't actually parent? We miss the heart of what we're supposed to do. Well, that's not true with Peter. Peter leaves and goes throughout the country to see other believers. But how many of us just need to be honest here and go, he was probably too busy to leave? I mean, we got a church of 600, maybe 700 people total at Bedrock. I feel like I can't leave sometimes. Peter has an important job, but there's a reality of Peter in Peter's life where he was available. And if you're going to want to see God do impossible things and amazing things in this world, you're going to need to be available. And so let me ask you today, are you available? Are you available to see what God is doing? Are you available to go where God wants you to go and go to some unpredictable places? You know why that guy wouldn't go to Israel with us, which I'm praying he does eventually? He's not available. He's too busy. The flights you can't do the flights. It costs too much money. It's all of these things. And so he's missing out on seeing an amazing thing because he's not available. And I wonder for us in this room, are you available? Are you available to go where God has called you to go? Are you available to walk into situations in life that you weren't planning on? And I know that you're busy, and I know that life is hard and busy, and we have what's called the tyranny of the urgent. Does anyone ever feel the tyranny of the urgent? What is pressing runs your schedule? What is pressing and so important? How many of you get worried about things that actually at the end of the day aren't important? Like you could say no and nobody dies, everyone does okay, and life is good. We call this the tyranny of the urgent. And you know, the enemy will use urgency to keep you from where God wants you to be. Are you available to do what God has for you? Now for Peter, he shows that he's available. He's willing to leave his mega church job and to go into the world because God's called him to do that. He goes, hey, you guys, you got to do this. I got to be available to go where God's called me to go, and I'm going to say yes. And I think the reason this happens is because Peter watched the life of Jesus. Luke chapter 7, verse 11 to 15. Now remember, Luke writes the Gospel of Luke, but also the book of Acts. So this story that's going to take place here, I want you to see how Jesus responds in this moment. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain. He has an appointment. He has something to do. Look, Jesus had 3.5 years of ministry. Jesus was always busy. Jesus always had a place to go. He's going to change the world. He's only got 3.5 years to do it, right? We got to get to work. We got some things to do. But Jesus was always available, and he still is today. When you call God, there's never a busy tone. He's always ready to pick up. He's always ready to hear from his children. He's ready to hear from you. So he goes to Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Okay, let's give some context of what's going on here. This boy, young man, dies. They are taking him out to be buried. So it's a kind of a foregone conclusion what's happening. He's not on his way to hospital. He's on his way to the cemetery. And Jesus is walking into the city. He's obviously got something to do. He's got important things to happen, but he sees this widow walking out, and she's going to bury her son. Now, this is really important for us to understand, because to be a widow at this time and have no son or person to help you, there's no covering for her in the culture. What do I mean? She can't work. She can't own property. She can't testify. She goes to the bottom of the totem pole in the culture. Right or wrong, that's the culture of that day. And so this meant destitution for this lady. Things aren't going to go very well. So, and a large crowd from the town was with her. So we have these two people headed to really important places. One is going into a meeting that they have in Nain. The other one is going to bury her son, and these two crowds meet. Verse 13, it says this: when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said to her, don't cry. Don't cry. Then he went up and touched the bier they were carrying him on, and the bearers stood still. So they're carrying him out to be buried, and Jesus touches the bier. They stood still, and he said, young man, I say to you, get up. The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Now, I want you to notice something. Jesus did not say, hey, I have an appointment with a dead guy. Jesus had an appointment in the city, but he was available to minister to people along the way. Here's what I want to say to this. Maybe availability for you is hard to think through. So let me ask you maybe a different question. Are you interruptible? Does God have the ability to rearrange your schedule? He's got access to your Google Calendar, right? And he can go, that meeting, we're moving that meeting. I got a different meeting for you. That vacation, we're going to be changing some things here. That, whatever this is or that may be, God has full permission to enter your life and interrupt what's going on. Because some of us make the will of God so mysterious that we're like, man, I can't do anything. I'm paralyzed. But some of us are so busy that we can't be moved or pivot. What we see in the life of Peter and what was modeled in the life of Jesus and the ministry of Jesus is Jesus goes, I'm interruptible. In fact, in just a few minutes, we're going to read another story about the resurrection of a 13-year-old girl or 12-year-old girl who, it's Jairus' daughter. But even as Jesus was going to do ministry, a woman stopped him. She touches the hem of his cloak. She had been sick for a very long time, a social outcast. And when she touches the hem of his cloak, she's healed, and Jesus stops and ministers to her. If you want to see God do impossible things, you need to be interruptible. You need to be available. And I wonder for how many of us, because like, here's the reality. Your agenda probably isn't impossible. And your agenda probably isn't considering and equating everything that's possible in the appointments that God may have for you. Some of like the type A people in here, you're freaking out right now, right? You're like, God's going to interrupt what? Interrupt my schedule. What do you mean? God's going to move things around. So you're like, I got it. God, from 8 o'clock to 8:05, that's your time, baby. You want to interrupt me? That's it. I got to get to my schedule the rest of the day, but from 8 to 8:05, I'm in, okay? The Lord's like, no. I got something more important for you to do. This week, I was at the gym. On Tuesdays, we have staff meeting at 10 a.m. So I go to the gym. I don't really work out. I end up talking to everybody the whole time. If you guys notice, my jawline is chiseled, right? Because I talk so much. But the reality is there's men in here that can testify to this fact, okay? Sometimes I'll be in there for 2.5 hours and like, what'd you do? I'm like, I just talked. I don't life, right? And so I'll go to the gym. I talk a lot. I don't even know why I take a shower. I didn't sweat, but I jump in the shower, change my clothes, and walk out. This week, I'm on my way to staff meeting. I felt like the Lord told me I needed to go talk to some people. So I stopped. I have my gym bag. I got all my clothes on, and I just sit and talk to these two guys. We end up talking for like 15 minutes or so. I end up texting Dan Page. He helps lead our staff. And I texted him and said, hey, I'm going to be late to the meeting. Now, I have an important meeting to get to. I have a 10 a.m. staff meeting. Super important, right? I mean, we get to invest in the life of our staff. We get to hear about what's going on in your lives. We pray for you. We pray to God. We seek what the future may be. I mean, this is important stuff. But I understood in that moment I needed to be interruptible because the ministry I was doing, standing there in the gym holding my bag, was more important than me being at a staff meeting. Are you interruptible in life? Right? I mean, we just sang a song that he has good plans. And what does that mean? His plans are greater than ours. And so for some of us, we need to be spiritually attuned to what God is doing to go, hey, there's a divine moment here. There's an opportunity here to see something incredible. And here's what I found. Impossible things are most always attached to ministry. They're attached to ministry opportunities where we have an opportunity to minister to someone. And some of you go like, well, I'm not going to preach a sermon. Good, neither did Peter. I'm not going to be a missionary. No, good. But you can be a missionary at your work. You can be a missionary at your kid's school. You can be a missionary and share the gospel at your kid's soccer team game, right? But the reality is like if you want to see God do impossible things, it's attached to ministry. And here's what I found. God gives the people who are most available the most ministry opportunities, and they see impossible things. And so maybe you're like in this room and you go, man, all this stuff in the Bible, is this really for me? It is for you. God's not done. But the reality is you need to be available. You need to be interruptible to see what God is going to do. So immediately, Peter responds, Acts 9:34. He's interrupted on his journey. Aeneas, Peter said to him, Jesus Christ heals you. Get up and roll up your mat. This should call to mind another story in the Bible that Peter got to witness. When there's a paralyzed man next to the pool of Bethesda that gets miraculously healed, and Jesus tells him to roll up his mat. Do you notice how God gave him glimpses in the past so he could believe for the future? Do you need to maybe recall the amazing things that God has done in your life? And why do you think those things are only for the past, and why can't they be for the future? We sing a song about it. I'll see you do it again. That's what the song is about, right? And the reality is are you believing what God can do? So immediately Aeneas got up and this incredible moment happens. But here's what I want us to focus on in this part. When you want to see God do impossible things, it's got to be about him and not you. Here's the second point of today's message. It's always been Jesus and still is. It's always been Jesus and still is. You want to see God do miraculous things? Stop trying to orchestrate everything yourself. Be faithful to what God has called you to. We always say this, be faithful to what God's called you to and trust him with the rest. Just trust him with the part of the process you can't handle. When something is bigger than you, stop trying to hold it up yourself and give it to the Lord. Right? Let him come in and take the burden and carry it with you. And that may be something going on in your marriage. That may be something going on with your health. That may be something going on in your finances. That may be something going on with your kids. That may be what you feel like is going on in the world. It's bigger than we are, so we need someone who's bigger than the world. In fact, the Bible says that he can hold all things together and all things rest upon him. But I want you to notice what Peter does. Peter learned something really early on, and this is what Peter says. Notice Peter doesn't start with himself and then get to Jesus. He starts with Jesus and gets himself out of the way. In Jesus Christ, be healed. And I want to just say this now. I may be getting into someone's kitchen, but I need to help us here. I have a really hard time with a lot of these dudes on TV. Doing all of these ministries, and it's about commercials, and I'll sell you a piece of fabric and you'll be healed and all of this stuff. And you know whose name I don't hear a lot, or I hear at the end? It's always Jesus, but I always hear there first. And let me just tell you something. God is not here to do miracles and do the impossible so that we get glory. I want you to notice what Peter did. Peter immediately steps back because he believes that God is going to heal Aeneas. And so he goes, Jesus Christ. And what did he do? He turned the mirror off himself and he reflected Christ. You want to know what just happened to Aeneas? Jesus happened to Aeneas, not me. If you want to see God do the impossible, you want to walk with God and see incredible things and things that you're like, that's a miracle, then it's got to go to him first, and the glory is his alone. The glory has to be for God alone. Let me ask you a question. Maybe for some of us in this room, you look at this and you go, I struggle to believe these things now. I don't know. I think that stuff's for the past. I mean, I know it's in the book of Acts and that's cool, but today's today. Well, I got to tell you something. His name is not the great I was. His name is the great I am. He is the same today, yesterday, tomorrow, and in the future. God does not change. And so I fully believe that these things are incredibly possible now because he is the great I am, not the great I was. And does anybody in this room need to hear that his name is the great I am? And some of you need to start believing God for what he can do and do alone. Man, you find yourself in an impossible situation, you're in a good place. Because you might just see the God of impossibility do something. But the glory has to get off of us and go to him immediately. But see, what happens here is we look at this story and we go, man, this physical healing is amazing. Like, wow, this guy was paralyzed and now he can walk. And now all of these things happen. And sometimes we miss the greater miracle. Because that's what happens in the story. I know that this is supernatural. This is amazing, but something else happens in the story that goes on here. And here's what we have to say, Acts 9:35. It's just this little verse at the end that Luke gives us an insight into the miracle that actually just happened. Because yes, Aeneas is healed, but God does something actually more incredible. Acts 9:35, all those who lived in Lydia and Sharon saw him and turned to the Lord. Do you notice how quickly Luke moves from he was healed and moves to what happens to the people? See, because like we in this room go, man, I don't know if miracles happen anymore. And I don't know. And in our mind, he's the great I was and not the great I am. But here's what just happened. And we witness it in this room all the time. You guys will hear me pray. And I will pray in this room. And we will invite people to know Jesus. Right? We will ask people to respond to the good news of Christ. That Jesus lived for you, he died for you, he rose again to conquer your sin, your shame, your death. And he showed that sin had no bound on him. It could not control him. Why? Because he is Christus Victus. He is Christ the victor. And so you and I, and the Bible says that something amazing happens, that when you believe in Jesus, by faith alone, by grace alone, you go from being spiritually dead to life. Do you understand that there are souls in this room? Every Sunday that we are here, we give an invitation to know Jesus. And God breathes the breath of life into dead souls and dead bones. And those who are spiritually dead come back to life. And we go, man, I don't know if God does miracles anymore. Every time you hear me say, I see your hand, I see that hand, I see that hand, somebody dead just came back to life. And do we need to believe and trust that God is still doing it? That he is the great I am. And I will contest anybody. I know that he healed a paralyzed person, but man, God did more than that in Lydda. He healed dead people who came back to life. Are we getting too used to the miracle? Do you guys know what's happening here at Bedrock is not normal? Do you know that what we're trying to do half the time is try to find space for everybody because we're running out of space all the time? And the church is growing. Do you know how peculiar and unusual that is? But are we getting used to the amazing? Are we getting used to the miraculous? Do we need to see it in the everyday stuff? Because here's the next point of today's message. Seeing God work in others' lives can help us believe for our own. Why do you think we had Daryl share his testimony today? Do you guys hear what's going on in their life? I think they downplayed it. Daryl told me like 2 Wednesdays ago after Fight Club. Fight Club, by the way, is not where the men of Bedrock beat each other up. Although sometimes I want to, okay? I'm just going to be honest. No, it's where we study the battles of the Bible. So any men in this room, we meet right here Wednesday nights, 6:30 p.m. I think we had 48 people here a few weeks, so it's like tight, but hey, it's cool, right? Show up, we'll find a place for you. I'll kick out like old members. I'll get out of here. There's a new guy. I actually did that 2 weeks ago. Dan Page and Zach Hall were sitting on the front, and these 2 first-time guests came in, and I said, hey, guys, get up. And they were like, ha, ha, ha. And I was like, no, get up. They're first-time guests. Get up. Show some hospitality. And so you might lose your seat, but hey, it's cool. But here's what goes on in this moment of what God is doing is that, why do we have Daryl share his testimony? Because to bring glory to Daryl and his family? No, not at all. Because when I was talking to Daryl after Fight Club, he said, man, we feel so called that we need to start another family group. Why? Because one of our family groups had 9 couples, so that's 18 adults, and almost 20-something kids in it. We need another group, right? Have you ever had 20 kids at your house? I had to buy them a new house. Like, it was crazy. They're like, our house fell down. I was like, yeah, 20 kids there. Crazy? Put them outside. And so what happens here is Daryl felt led by the Lord to start a group because we needed to create more space for families to be able to plug in. And so what does he do? He says yes, and then his car engine blows up. Daryl's an incredible mechanic, and literally his engine block split. What? Not only that, someone hacked into his bank account, stole thousands of dollars. They had other moments in health and all of these things, and their house is in the middle of being remodeled. You see, do you see how we can get to the excuse? Well, my house is being remodeled, my engine block blew up, I lost that money, all of these things, and all of these things happen. Why do we have Daryl share his testimony? Because that's pretty miraculous. You have a family who is in this moment saying yes to God. The world is coming against them. And you know what he said to me? He goes, God's got us. We're going to be completely okay. And if we got to sit in a little bit of drywall dust, we'll sit in a little bit of drywall dust. I am so believing for what God's going to do in that group. Why? Because the resistance is so incredible. So, man, God enters into this moment, but seeing and hearing your story and what God is doing is sometimes hearing the miracle that has happened to you will give people belief for their own. Do you need to share your story in this place? Some of you have incredible stories, and God's not done writing it, by the way. The end of your story isn't here. You'd be dead if he was done, but he's not. Share the story. What's God doing in your life? And remember, your testimony is not about you. It's about the God who's working in your life. So you should talk about God more in your story than you do about yourself. So what happens here is we see these believers go through this incredible moment. And then now we're going to get into this next story. And it's like two miraculous stories back to back. Acts chapter 9, verse 36 and 30 to 38, it says this. In Joppa, which is now modern-day Jaffa, this is the city where Jonah flees to get a boat to flee God. All right, some of you know the story of Jonah and the whale. That's a pretty famous one. This is the place he catches his ride. Doesn't go well, but this is the port city where we go. In Joppa, there was a disciple named Tabitha. Her Greek name was Dorcas. That's kind of unfortunate, but that's her name. Tabitha, beautiful name, Tabitha. What's your Greek name? Dorcas. Whoa, that was okay. They both mean gazelle. And I was like, man, that one hits better than the other. But anyway, I feel bad because she's a great lady and I'm talking junk about her name. I'll meet you in heaven and don't beat me up. Okay, so she was always doing good and helping the poor. Really incredible lady. About that time, so while Peter is in Lydda working on this person, Aeneas, this is what's happening in Joppa. She became sick. It was obviously of a pretty severe illness because she dies. She becomes sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. She's getting prepared to be buried. Lydda was near Joppa, so the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, and they sent two of them to him and urged him, please come at once. How many of us would hear the story like, hey, she's dead, and we go, why do you need me to go? What do you want me to do? She's dead. Like it's a little bit late. I mean, maybe if it's, I can just heal people, right? Well, actually, the Lord heals people. What do you want me to do? Dead people, it's out of my realm. How many of us would just hear these two people coming and say, this lady, her name's Dorcas? I'd be like, Dorcas? No, I'm not coming. But, like, the reality is like, they come and they talk to Peter, and how many of us would write off that anything could happen because she's dead? There's an impossible situation ahead of you, and you go, well, so what am I going to do there? But remember, Peter walked and lived with Jesus. I'm going to read us a story now from the Gospel of Luke about Jairus' daughter. Jairus was a synagogue leader. His daughter gets sick, and so he sends these disciples or followers that he was with to Jesus to come heal his daughter. While they're on their way, the story is that they're passing through a large crowd. A lady touches the hem of his cloak, and she's miraculously healed. But man, there's bad news that happens. While Jesus was interrupted, the little girl dies. She's 12 years old. That's where we're going to jump into the story. So I want you to notice something. Jesus gets interrupted and we think there's a disaster. But Jesus gets interrupted and he's going to do the greater miracle. To some of you, your life is being interrupted. Things are going on in your life and you need to believe that God's about to do something better. That he can do something better. Luke chapter 8, verse 49, it says this, while Jesus was still speaking, some came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, he said. Do not bother the teacher anymore. They go like, man, Jesus could have healed her, but she's dead now, so let's just let this go. This is impossible now. We're in the realm of impossibility. Jesus overhears the conversation. Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed." What? No, she's dead. She doesn't need healed. She's dead. Jesus goes, "Don't be afraid. He will be healed. She will be healed. Just believe." So Jesus goes like, "Let's go to the house." Verse 51, when he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James. 3 of the disciples get to go in the room. Who are we talking about in the story of Acts? Peter. Peter got to see this story. Peter got to see what Jesus could do in the lives of people, the miraculous things that God is capable of, and the child's father and mother. So these people, 5 people come in. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. So Jesus walks in and says, "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She is not dead, but asleep." To Jesus, she's just sleeping. To us, it's dead. What does your perspective need to be on your impossible situation? I'm just asking, like, is the situation sleeping or is it dead? I think it just depends on what perspective you look at it from. So Jesus goes, "Hey, stop crying. She's just sleeping. She's not dead." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. They're like, "The body's cold, bro. You're an idiot. Like, she's gone. This is impossible." But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Does it sound like the story we may be reading here today? Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. I guess when you die and come back to life, you hungry. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened. I wonder if as the disciples or the believers from Joppa came to Peter and said, "Hurry up, this lady's died," if Peter goes, "I've heard a story like this before. I've seen a moment like this before. I wonder what God's going to do here. I wonder if anything's going to be happening." I imagine that Peter would be replaying the story of Jairus' daughter in his mind. See, because not only the text gives us so many reasons for Peter to go to think on a higher level, right? Because what city is it? It's Joppa. What happened in Joppa? Jonah and the whale. The story of Jonah and the whale it's a physical story, but it has a spiritual meaning, right? Because Jonah is in the belly of the whale for, help me crowd, 3 days. The days of impossibility. Jonah is in the whale because he's fleeing from God. He's showing spiritual death and disobedience, but what happens when the whale spits him out? He goes to reach Nineveh. The story of Jonah and the whale is a story of rebirth and new life, of the impossible. God took someone who was spiritually dead and made them alive. Peter would be very familiar with the story as a Jewish believer. And I wonder if he goes, "Man, this is a story of Jonah and the whale. Someone who was dead was brought back to life. This sounds a lot like the story of Jairus' daughter. I wonder if God's going to do something to bring her back to life. I wonder if he's going to do the impossible." And you notice that Peter had to be available and interruptible. Some of us would be like, "Man, someone just got healed. I need to stay here and hang out." No, there's something else to be done. And so Peter leaves and goes with them. Let me ask you a question, because I think Peter is such a beautiful example of faith. Because, by the way, Peter's not the hero of the story, Jesus is. But what Jesus did in the life of Peter, he can do the same thing in our life. And here's what I think Peter is willing to do. And I wonder if we're willing to do the same in here. Are you willing to trust God for the impossible? Does that mean he's going to do it every time? No, but can he? Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of us are missing the impossible things of God. Our marriage is being restored. Seeing those who were dead spiritually come back to life. To seeing our kids come home. To see our financial situation getting resolved and worked out. To see life being hard. To seeing all of these things go on because we're not willing to believe God for the impossible. We would be the one who would go, she's dead? Well, what do you want me to do here? And I wonder if that's like our stance on some of the things that are happening in our life right now. You look at the situation, you go, man, that's impossible. I think the Bible would encourage you and go, good, God does his best work on impossible days. Lazarus is healed on an impossible day. Jairus' daughter is brought back to life on an impossible day. Jesus bodily resurrects on an impossible day. God does his best work in the impossible. Don't miss it. Don't miss what he can do in these moments because he's not the great I was, he is the great I am. So Peter faithfully goes to the city to see this woman. Verse 39 of chapter 9, Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken upstairs to the room. All the widows stood around him crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was still with them. If you've ever been to a funeral, they have like pictures of people. They have their Bibles sometimes or things that they like to do. They're doing the same thing. Do you notice, though, that people are crying again? Does this not just sound like the story of Jairus' daughter? I wonder if Peter walks in and goes, man, this is like the same story. But remember, Peter just went through this, and he reflected immediately to the glory of God, not his own. Peter sent them all out of the room. Does that sound familiar? When they got then he got down on his knees and prayed. What is he doing? He's submitting himself to the Lord. He's saying, Lord, this is your work, not my work. This is what you can do and not me alone. So he prayed. Turning toward the dead woman, he said, Tabitha, get up. She opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He took her by the hand and helped her to her feet. Then he called for the believers, and especially the widows, and presented her to them. This became known all over Joppa, and many people believed in the Lord. Notice an incredible, impossible moment led to another moment of impossibility. Those who are far from God, spiritually dead, came back to life. Every time you hear someone's hand raised in this room and they have believed in Jesus, and we lead them in that prayer, and the prayer doesn't save them. It's just leading their heart through what just happened. It's a way for them to confess with their mouth and believe in their heart that Christ is Lord. Every time you hear that, someone dead came back to life. Don't get used to that. That's incredible that someone who is far from God was brought near to God by the power of God. But let me ask you a question here today. Are you in a position that you need God to show up? I mean, no one's physically died, but death can come in a thousand different ways, can't it? Death of a marriage, death of your finances, death of a business, the heartache of losing a child who's prodigal, a prodigal in your life, dreams that have been dashed away, something has been transformed and shifted in your life. I don't know what that is. But are you in an impossible position today? What do you need to believe? What is the text telling us? Are these just cool stories? Or is the Lord incorporating them into the scriptures so that we can't just go, man, he was the God who was? Or is he the great I am? I still believe that God can do the impossible in this place. I still believe he can do the miraculous. I still believe that he can raise dead people back to life. He can heal people. I believe in those things. But the reality is you and I, like, because we're scared of being disappointed, we're scared of doing all of these things. And listen, like, resurrection in the Bible is not a common thing. It happens about 10 times in the Bible between the Old Testament and New Testament. Can he do it? Absolutely. Sometimes he won't. Why? Because he has a greater plan. He knows something better. He has something better to do. I always say this, we don't want to pray people out of heaven. You know, like, understand what I'm saying here. Like, for some people, when they die, they're to be absent with the body is to be present with the Lord. So we can ask and we can pray and we can beseech them, but a lot of times our prayers for a miracle are more about us than they are about them. Could you do this? Absolutely. Can he do it? Absolutely. But man, for some people, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and he lovingly is going to keep them with him. But can he do it? 100%. See, because like, if Peter wasn't willing to go to the place of impossibility, he would have missed the impossibility. So are you just like spiritually living in your home? You're like the guy that wants to go to Israel but can't get on a plane. And you're wishing you could see these things, and you're wishing these things would happen, and you're wishing that these things would happen. But man, like your life, you're like bubble boy, okay? You're like, you have basically wrapped yourself in bubble wrap because, man, you don't want anything to touch you in this world. And so you stop stepping out in faith. You stop moving to where God would have you be. Man, that's impossible and that's hard and I don't know. And man, what if I believe and I'm disappointed and all of these things? And man, you just need to walk in faith and believe in the God of impossibility. And somebody just ask you in this room, are you living a life absent of faith? Like some of us are curating our life so much and building our life so much and developing our life so much that we go, man, I don't need you to show up in my life, God. I'm all good. Just please don't make me do something crazy and shake the foundation. But then you wonder and you look at this and you go, man, but why don't I see these stories? And why don't I see these things happening in my life? And man, why am I not seeing all of this incredible things happening? Is there something wrong with me? Or have you built and designed your life to the final detail that you don't need a life of faith? You just designed it. It's curated. It looks perfect. As we end this morning, let me share you with this moment. Because in college, I went to Liberty University. We hear from these incredible people. I mean, we would go we had this thing called Missions Emphasis Week where these missionaries would come in and they'd tell us stories. They were incredible. And this one missionary talks about how he's crashed a plane. He's not a good pilot. I would never fly with him, but he's crashed a plane 3 times. Like, not a good pilot. Probably needs a new, just ride a bus, bro. But the reality is he's been saved, right? All these times. And I would see these miraculous stories of these missionaries and these people go out and they'd say hey, we were going to an unreached village in the middle of the Himalayas, and we would get there and people would know who we are because Jesus showed up to them in a dream. And Jesus told them, and by the way, that's happening all over the Middle East right now. All over the Middle East, people are having visions and dreams of Jesus. Jesus is coming to them in dreams, and they are getting saved, and they need someone to explain to them what is going on, but God is doing a miraculous work. And so I'd get jealous. I'd be like, man, why don't I have these kind of stories? And I say this all the time. Everybody wants a miracle until they need a miracle. Right? We all want a miracle story until you're in the situation where you need a miracle. And Kelsey and I were in that situation a little bit. When we first planted Bedrock, we were dirt poor. We were living on food stamps. We had no money. And so one morning, I'm getting ready to go to a church planning meeting. And I'm getting ready, and Kelsey runs into the room, and she goes, Blake, I think our account's been hacked. We're down $225 in our bank account. We're negative. That's not good. Right? We're in the red, $225. We're so poor, we can't make up the money. And so I'm like, great, man, Lord, I'm supposed to go talk about church planting, and now we're $225 in the red, and what's up with that? I said, yes, bro. I'm here planting this church. Why this? So I leave. I'm frustrated. It's the worst church planting meeting ever. There's zero vision. I'm mad. I'm upset. I have zero faith. I'm like, yeah, whatever. If you want to give, whatever, okay, but don't really, because I'm going to have to give up. While I'm in that meeting, I get a text message from Kelsey. Kelsey had just gone and shot photographs for this restaurant, 3 different restaurants for this guy. He was in the first service, actually. And she texted me and she said, hey, I just want to let you know, so-and-so has reached out to us. They said that we mischarged them for the 3 photograph sessions. And no one texts you to say good news, right? It's like, oh, you overcharged us. And so I go, okay, when it rains, it pours, right, God? Thanks, Lord. This is awesome. I can't wait to get out of this meeting so that I can go lose more money. $225. Not a big deal to some of us, but when you have no money, that's a lot of money. So I get there. I call Kelsey. I'm mad. I'm in downtown Lakewood Ranch. I don't know why they call that downtown. Just a couple of shops, okay? But the reality is I'm in Starbucks there, and I'm calling her, and I'm like, okay, lay the news on me. And she goes, yeah, so-and-so called me and told me we mischarged them. And I'm like, okay, what do we owe them? And she goes, no, they actually called and told me that we should have charged them $75 more per photo shoot. I was like, hey, right? So I'm poor. So I'm like, yeah. So I jump up. I start rewriting the invoice. I'm like, right? I don't even think about what's happening. Some of you are good at math. Some of you aren't. Some of you, you're going to be counting on your fingers. Don't worry. Okay, I'll give you the math. 75 times 3 is 225. How many dollars was I overdrawn in my checking account? 225. On the morning I most needed it, on the morning I felt like giving up the most, on the morning I thought we were dead, is the morning that God showed up. Filled our bank account. We got back to zero. We didn't go back to 225 million. That would have been nice, but we were at zero. I didn't owe anybody money. We could live to fight another day. And I know you look at that, and now that's like one of our like cool miracle stories. But man, it wasn't great when I was in that story. Don't let your circumstance right now define the goodness of God. Let the goodness of God define the circumstance you're in. Do you need to believe God for the impossible? And if you're wondering why you're not seeing it, are you stepping out in life in a place that you need to see it? Man, God loves you too much to let you fall all the way down. He's got you. But some of us need to get out of the house and get on the plane and start moving to where God has us. And I guarantee you, he's going to take care of you. You need to step out in faith. Where is that in your life right now? Where's that in your marriage? Where's that in your business? Where's that in raising your kids? I don't know, but this story isn't in here to just make us feel good. It's a story that's in here to challenge us with our situation. Where do you need to go with the Lord today?